All right. Oh, can we all hear that? Okay. Um, Again, my name is Cindy Allen, and I am one of three graphic designers that work here on the Athens campus and have the distinction of being what I like to call the logo popo. So, in terms of using our college and extension logos, I'm sort of the person that polices all that and also can help anybody that needs help with that sort of thing. So keep that in mind for future reference. My contact info will be at the end of all this. Let's talk a little bit about branding and why we should do it in the first place. Branding applies to all sorts of things. It's everywhere. I'm sure you recognize a few of these brands. Um, and what these folks are trying to do is stand out from the crowd and let you know that they're here and that they want to be here for you and they would like you to use their services. We're not much different than that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. I always like to use the Target logo as an example of branding that's really so effective that it doesn't need any words. You know, who would think that a red dot or basically a circle would be so identifiable that you can only see a piece of it and you know exactly who it is and what they're doing. For us, it's important to brand because we want people to identify with us as well. And part of the way we do that is by having something that people can identify with that's what I like to call a stamp of some sort. These programs exist to communicate the character and reputation of an institution, and they also will unify the communications of the organization. So, in Extension, for example, whether it be the Master Gardener program or any of the other things that are happening through Extension, we really want people to know, the end user to know that those things are coming out of Extension, and the more that we can get that message across, the more that people are aware that Extension is important in their everyday lives. And when it comes to things like budget cuts that we all love to talk about, it's really great if our constituents know who we are so that they can go to bat for us. And that's one really important reason to brand. And that's one important reason that we like to be associated with the University of Georgia, because it is such a strong brand. The cornerstone of any visual identity program and a key to successful branding is an institution's logo, which is also, you'll hear me use these words interchangeably, a mark. So here I have one of the university's logos, and I think it's important to keep in mind for all of us that we're all a part of the University of Georgia, and we want to kind of have that message out there so that we can unify ourselves when it comes to communicating with the public. I don't know how many of you guys actually work with the university's logos, but I wanted you to be aware of this particular uh, website that you can go to, which has all of the identity information for the university itself. Talks about the usage of the logos and what's correct to do, what's not correct to do, and that sort of thing. So as you're looking through these slides, just keep in mind that there are going to be some references in here that might be good to help you down the road. I wanted to show you, this is a part of that page where you can see that the different iterations of the logo are there for you to see and to use and to download. There's also information on that website about our official university colors and that sort of thing. The The person that's in charge of the university's logos and the policy surrounding them is Allison Huff. This is her contact information now. One thing you should know in terms of what's going on at the university is in the past there's been a real separation of what is our academic logo, which is the arch that you see here, and then, of course, the Georgia G that has been primarily used by athletics. In the past, those have been very clearly separated, and now there's been some pressure to sort of see that Georgia G on some things that are not necessarily athletics. While we don't really encourage this, nor does Allison, there are some instances where that has been approved. But again, there are special things you have to go through to have that used on anything. So if anybody thinks about using that Georgia G, please go ahead and just contact me personally, and we can talk about that. What I mainly want to talk to you about today are our logos, meaning the College of Ag and Environmental Sciences logos and the Extension logos. Just as a logo is the cornerstone of a well-crafted identity program, the university's arch can be considered the cornerstone of both our college's logo and the Extension logo. The arch, along with the use of the university's official typeface, combined to create both of our logos, Extension and the College of Ag. And this just kind of goes back to that idea of the University of Georgia is our overarching, no pun intended, entity. And we want to be associated with them. And so we use colors, typefaces, graphic elements, i.e. the arch, to tie in with the university and yet brand ourselves. For anybody who would like to know, the official type family of the university is Galliard. It is what the words the University of Georgia are written in most of its iterations in terms of logo usage. And sometimes it's used in the body text for a lot of university publications. So just a fun fact if you would like to know that. This slide is showing you the iterations of our college's logo. The logo that you see on top, we call that the three-stack logo, is our sort of logo of choice, if you will. And that's the one that we like to brand most of our college's materials with. The one in the center is actually reserved for more formal uses, say an award or a formal invitation, things like that. And then the logo at the bottom, which is nice and long, the purpose of that is to just have a solution for folks who need to do something really large and long, for example, say a 16-foot banner, something like that. We generally try to stay away from using this sort of thing on printed pieces unless the format of that really dictates that. So for those of you who use the college's logo as opposed to the Extension logo, this one on the top is the preferred iteration of that. These are the new Extension logos, or relatively new. Some of you may have materials that have the old logo stuff on them, and that's perfectly fine. We don't want you throwing those out, but once you do have the opportunity to put things on new materials, we would like you to use this new logo. And yes, Brock, there are printed guidelines. There's going to be a website here I'm going to direct you to that you can go to, and I can also send you this show at the end. Okay, so back to this new logo. There are two sort of standard looks of this. The one at the top associates both the College of Ag and Environmental Sciences and the College of Family and Consumer Sciences, of which Extension is a part of both of these. We really try not to use this one too much. We're trying to simplify things a little bit, and so It's really this bottom one in this case that we want to see used on folks' materials. Um, the one on the top, we use it sometimes for, say, if we're going to a trade show and we're making big window shade banners, something that's really large where that type can show on the bottom, and maybe we're sponsoring things with other people. That might be a typical use of this. But we'd really like to encourage you, when you're using the logos, to use the one that you see on the bottom here. Okay, this is a little bit in response to Brock's question. On our college's website, the website you see here, you're going to be able to download these logos in most cases, and you're going to be able to read about all kinds of guidelines about how to use them and what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, what file formats are good for you to use in certain situations. And the main purpose of my presentation today is to go over some of those things and maybe clarify some stuff that might be confusing to people who are not particularly art folks or design folks or publication folks. So again, this is our overarching website here. And there are very similar websites. This one talks about extension logos and policies, and we've just broken them out. Most of the policies are the same, but we just have those two separate areas for people to look at so they can go specifically to either extension logos or the college's logos. What I'd like to talk to you about now is file formats for logos, because this is an area where people tend to have a lot of confusion or angst. So when you go to our website and you want to download one of these logos, you're going to see two file formats. One of them is EPS and the other one is JPEG. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the differences in those and when you should use one versus the other. And again, this is on our website. Okay, first, the EPS logo. What you need to know about that is, number one, if you're producing materials that you're going to have done anywhere else besides you're printing them off of your own printer, if you're sending something to a t-shirt vendor or a printer or anybody outside of your little area, EPS files are the industry standard for sending logos to people. What EPS stands for is Encapsulated PostScript, if anybody cares about that. But what's important about these files, this is the really critical thing, and I'll talk about a little more, is it's a vector-based file. And what that means is that when the programs are generating that logo, they're doing it based on math. So every time you enlarge that, they're calculating a mathematical equation. And what that means is that an EPS logo is infinitely scalable. And what I mean by that is you can take that EPS logo from our website and you can put it on a postage stamp or you can put it on the side of the building. And either one of those is going to be clear and crisp. It makes no difference how large or small it is other than smallness for readability. So if you wanted a billboard, for example, it would make no difference that you blew that up to the size of the billboard. It would stay perfectly clear. The other thing to know about EPS files is that they have a transparent background. And what's important about that is that you can put them on colors. So if you had a brochure that was red and you wanted a white logo on there, you would see the white logo, but you wouldn't see a white box around it. So hopefully this visual here will give you an idea of what I'm talking about. These are examples of EPS files, and all these were generated from the same logo, from the same EPS file. You can see that they're all crisp. Doesn't matter how large that arch is or how small, it still doesn't have what we like to call jagged edges on it. Okay, let's talk about the JPEG file and how it contrasts with that a little bit. JPEG files were originally, I guess, invented, I guess we could use that word, by photographers. And so what JPEG stands for is Joint Photographic Experts Group. What's important to remember about that is that word photographic. A logo, a mark, is not a photograph. It's a graphic art file. So really, when you think about logos, you should think about EPS files. When you think about photographs, JPEGs are the way to go, okay? The thing about a JPEG is it is a pixel-based file, and what that means is that all the pixels are the same size, and when you enlarge those pixels, things degrade. So a JPEG file is not infinitely scalable. It will not look good if you try to put it on the side of a building or put it on a billboard, and it will not have a transparent background. So let's look at this next slide. These are JPEG files. The first thing that you'll notice is they all have a white box around them. So my gray background cannot come through. The second thing you'll notice about them is at the bottom right one, the cooperative extension is nice and clean and crisp, but when you get to the one on the left, those are the pixels. Those are those pixels just getting jaggy, okay? So EPS, clear and crisp anywhere. JPEGs degrade depending on what size you use them at. So, which should you use? One of my favorite slogans, just for life in general, I guess, is begin with the end in mind. And this is something that you really need to think about when you're working with publications, because you want to ask yourself, what am I doing this for and how am I going to produce it? Because if you're just printing it off in-house on your little inexpensive printer, that's one thing. But if you're sending it to a magazine for an ad insert, or you're having a commercial printer produce your piece, things are going to be a little bit different about how you set things up. So again, EPS files are the industry standard for art and graphic files, okay? And you can use those words interchangeably. The other thing is always supply to your vendors EPS file. And if you have vendors that don't know what an EPS file is, get another vendor, because they don't know what they're doing, okay? So EPS files, go to vendors. EPS files will work in all of your programs. People are used, I think most common folk, right, not art people, are really more familiar with those JPEG files, but I'd really like you to think a little bit about this EPS file and all that it has to offer. It works in all your popular page layout programs, all word processing programs. Okay, for JPEGs, that's the industry standard for photographic files. The other place that we use JPEG files are for the web. And there's just a note here I want to let you know that the JPEG files that are on our website, they are high-resolution files, which means they're going to have some flexibility in how large you can use them, but that flexibility is limited, okay? So you're probably not going to be able to make that logo any bigger than, say, 6 inches, 5 or 6 inches wide. And another usage for these JPEG files is when you're printing on non-PostScript printers, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But basically, most people have what we call inkjet printers or personal desktop printers, and those printers generally are not PostScript. Now, that PostScript word, if you remember from EPS, PostScript was one of the words in that. So what happens if you print on your inkjet printer an EPS file, it may not even show up. It may show up as a box because your printer doesn't have the brain power to read that file. Whereas if you go to a commercial printer, that's exactly what they need, is that EPS file. So if you're doing a document that you're going to just print out in-house and your printer is maybe not the greatest in the world, say you paid less than a couple $100 for it, you're probably going to want to use a JPEG file. because what's going to happen is your printer's not going to be able to read that EPS file. Okay, one of the biggest things when people first start working with EPS files, when they download them from our website, is they want to click, once they've downloaded it, they want to click on that file and they want to see it. Well, funnily enough, you cannot do that. You're not really supposed to be able to open an EPS file. That's kind of the purpose of the EPS file, because if you could open it, then you could move things around and do all kinds of things that we might rather you not do. So if you're downloading these EPS files from the site, don't worry, don't click on them and try to look at them. You saw what they look like on the website. What you need to do is put it in a place on your computer where you can find it, and then whatever you're working in, if you're working in a word processing document or PowerPoint, just use whatever command that you would use to place art into that program. You use that command. It might be insert picture, it might be place, it might be get picture, it might be get graphics. But anyway, just think about it as I'm going to get this piece of art and I'm going to place it in my document. And once you go and get it and you place it, it's going to be in your document. And once it's in your document, you can resize it, you can move it around, you can do whatever you want. So don't freak out when you cannot open an EPS file. Just think, I've got to get it where I want it. I've just got to put it in my document, and then I can work with it. Okay? This is another concern that I talked a little bit about the EPS files. When your EPS file looks awful, it's because your printer is not a PostScript printer. Okay? So if you're the one producing the final output and that's all you have is your, not so great printer, then use a JPEG file. Just note when you use a JPEG, you're not going to be able to put a colored background on it. Okay? It's always going to have a white background. Okay, so what I'd like you to think about is use those EPS file formats unless you're putting a logo on a website or you're producing something on your own inkjet non-PostScript printer. Okay? All right, these are just screenshots of our website. Basically, I'm showing them so you get just a little visual recognition of what you're going to see when you go to our site. Basically, when you go, there are going to be instructions for downloading the file, and you're going to see the different versions of the logos that you can get. I don't know that you can really see on this screen, but down here in the bottom, with my lovely pen mark there, they're different file formats. So you're going to see the EPS file. You're going to see the JPEG file. This also has a PMS file on it, which we've gotten rid of just because it's not really used by many people besides us. So what you're going to see on there is EPS and JPEG. So you just want to go to the one you want, click on it, and begin the downloading process. Okay, let's move on and talk about once you've gotten the logo that you want, what are appropriate things to do with it, what are not appropriate things to do with it. And let me just say one thing up front. We have, obviously, the college logo, which you see in the bottom left of my slides, and we have the extension logo. On your publications, you should not have both of those things. When you're branding, you want to be clear about where it's coming from and whose basically stamp is on it. Okay, so when you're doing your publications, if you're out of extension, you should be using the extension logo, and if you're not, you should be using the college's logo. Okay, so the first point is that when you're using a logo, please use the logo that's from authorized artwork. What that means is use one of the logos that you've downloaded from our website, not one that your grandmother made for you in the basement. Okay? As noted before, the three-line logo is the preferred logo for usage. And the flush left logo, what that means, flush left, let me get my magic pen here again. See how the college and the E, all that lines up? That's flush left, okay? Flush left versions of the logo give more flexibility to design and layout. Typically, when people who are just laying out things, if you look at standard things that maybe come across your desk that have not been professionally reproduced, everything is centered, okay? We want to try to stay away from that, okay? It's less professional looking, it's harder to read, it's harder to follow with the eye. So think about flush left being good, centered, not so great. Okay, as stated earlier, the centered version of the logo is reserved for formal invitations and awards. It's just more formal to have it in that centered usage, and we really don't want to see that anywhere else. Okay, when you're creating something, the first thing that you should ask is, why am I doing this? Excuse me. In other words, who is this for? And what is the purpose of it? And that should drive what you do. Okay? Who's your audience? What's it for? And what is it you have to say should drive the design of all materials. And the common parlance for that in the art word is form follows function. Okay? So when is it appropriate? How much do you have to say? Is it more appropriate in a brochure? Is it something that needs to be put on a billboard? Who am I talking to? And what's going to be the best way for me to get my message to the people? Okay? The next thing you should note about the when using logos on these pieces is that the logos are really a badge or a stamp. Okay? They're not the primary visual focus. Whatever it is you're doing is the visual focus. If you're having a conference or something like that, that's what the audience is interested in, and that's what you want to communicate. The logo is just there sort of as brought to you by Extension or brought to you by the College of Ag. It's just an identifier that helps brand us and let the audience know that, oh, look, Extension has done this. Oh, they've done this. They do this and this. Look at how many things they do. Or look at how many things the college is involved with. So it's not the college presents X, Y, or Z. It's here's X, Y, or Z brought to you by the college or brought to you by Extension. Okay, here's an example of using the logo as a badge. If you look down, let me get my fat little pen down. Oh, look at that straight line. I don't like that one. Let's do the little circle. If you look right down here, this piece was done as sort of to create awareness about what UGA or particularly our college was doing in terms of local foods. That was the focus of the piece. But certainly we want to make sure that everybody knows it was brought to them by the college. So we've just put a little stamp here on the cover. Just as a little reminder. And then the next thing we did, once you opened up the piece, this area on the right here is an example of one of the spreads. I know you can't read that, but what it says is, rather than having the logo there, it says UGA College of Ag and Environmental Sciences. And I use this as an example just to give you all something to think about, because I hear a lot from people in Extension that nobody knows who we are or what this is, who's bringing them this. If you can think about using that logo as a badge, so you're branding your cover, maybe your front cover, your back cover, but on your materials, if you're handing out, a 7 or 8 page publication, there's nothing wrong with saying UGA Extension. just putting the words down there in the bottom rather than having to use a logo. And that way, if I'm showing my friends this or I'm Xeroxing that page to show to somebody, look, there it is. There's my identity down there. It says, oh, look, this is UGA extension piece. Okay, so something to think about when you're doing things. Okay, these were some bookmarks that were done for the Master Gardener program, and the three on the top there you see are the front. Okay, basically no mention of extension, no mention of who is brought to you by, but it's getting to the audience. Okay, then once you turn it over, all of the backs were the same. They were all branded in the same way. And they have the little extension logo there, okay? So it's like, oh, Master Gardener's brought to you by Extension, okay? So you can do some really nice visual things, and then your extension logo is just a little stamp on the back. I put this publication in because we're going to be talking about 4-H a little later. And this is, I would say, the only case where you're going to see two competing marks, okay? You've got the 4-H emblem, and you've got the college's logo right down here together, okay? As I said earlier, we don't want to see the college's logo and the extension logo, okay? It's brought to you by a particular entity. But there are going to be always exceptions to the rule, and 4-H is sort of in a land by itself, and we really have to have an association with UGA along with 4-H to help our brand and our identity. So those two things are used together. So on the left here is the cover design. Again, those two little things are just stamps, okay? It's a brochure about what you could major in that relates to 4-H, okay? It's not about the college. It's not about 4-H. It's about kids and what they can major in, but brought to you by these two entities. Oh, sorry, getting a little click happy. All right, here's another example of this chosen 4-H again, just because we're going to talk about it later. This was a poster design, but again, for a program for kids. Down at the bottom right, we've just stamped it. We've stamped it with 4-H. We've stamped it with extension. And as your constituents see those stamps, they may not know it, but they're going to be able to recognize them after a while. And certainly 4-H is a very recognizable emblem. So we'd love to have the extension emblem be, 1/100th as recognizable as that 4-H emblem. All right. So what I showed you all those examples for is to basically say that whatever you're doing, your programs should create a graphic look for their materials. They can and they should have that graphic look, but they should not conflict with the college or extension identity, whichever one of those you're working with. So what that means in English is, if you have a program, don't think so much about creating a logo for it. Think about creating a look for it. And we'll talk a little bit more about how you might do that. So some of the things you can use are typography, photography, illustrations, the particular selection of paper. All those things can combine to create a set of materials that look like they all live together. Okay, so there's a family look. And we'll take a look at this here in a second. All right, so I'm sure some of you are familiar with our friend Walk Georgia. So again, Walk Georgia has a color palette. It has, we won't call this a logo, it has a graphic mark. It always uses photographs in its materials, has a color palette, and again, just down here at the bottom, brought to you by Extension. Okay, brought to you by Extension. So this goes back to thinking about what it is you're trying to get from your audience. You know, we want to tell them about Walk Georgia. We really don't want to tell them about Extension. We just want to let them know, look at all the great, this is just one of the great and groovy things that Extension is doing. Okay, here's another happy family. This is an older version of Ag Forecast, but again, on the left here was a cover design for a larger booklet, and on the right is a brochure front, brochure inside, and then an agenda. You can see all the pieces and parts. We have used the same photograph, which actually has a nice color palette to it. Here we've just used a piece of the photograph, and we've used the same type treatment, okay, so that when folks are looking at these pieces, they're like, oh, look, they all live together, okay? And once again, brought to you by the College of Ag, okay? Just brought to you by the College of Ag. That's all you need to say. Okay. Logo usage. Resize, don't bastardize. Hopefully y'all can remember that. What that means is when you resize, do so appropriately and proportionally, okay? So you do want to use the university or college mark appropriate to your material's purpose, okay? So are you Extension or are you a part of a college? You do want to maintain the integrity of the logo. What that means is when you resize it, you want to resize it proportionally. You don't want to stretch it one way or the other, okay? You don't want to elongate it or in any other way distort it, okay? You do want to print the logos in their official colors and configurations, and you do want to align the college marks with other elements on the page so it doesn't look like it's just plopped down. Don'ts. Okay, do not create individual logos for county, academic, administration, or other units. Again, the importance of branding is that what I like to say about this is, I don't know, in the end, people don't really care where they get something from. They just need something. You know, I need information on how to deal with this pest. And that's what I want to know. But if I have that stamp in the bottom that says brought to you by Extension, I'm going to start to say, gosh, Extension, all these things that are brought to you by Extension, they're bringing me some good stuff. And that's where you create that loyalty. If we had to create a logo for every different entity on campus, it would just dilute our overall brand and our overall mission, okay? Do not separate out parts of a logo. Do not combine logos with other images or text. That means don't put anything over our logo. Don't have anything touching our logo. Don't put words across it. Don't stretch it, skew it, or alter the proportions. Don't angle or rotate it. Don't crowd it, meaning don't have anything up too close to it, and don't screen it. Okay, just use the logos that you find on the site like you find them. Here's our friends. Okay, don't do any of these things to the logo. When you see this, this is how it always looks. This is not how it looks. Okay. Anybody have any questions for me right now? All right, I'm going to turn off my little Mr. Microphone and hand it over to Jenny Jordan, if I can do that. Let's see.
Okay, I think you did it, Cindy. Can y'all hear me? Raise your hands or clear your checks or give me some sign that you're out there and alive. Okay, I see some stuff moving. I'm going to see if I can find where my slides are on here. Okay. And we'll go from there. We're going to talk a little bit about the 4-H name and emblem. And Cindy has given us so much great background information on how we consider a brand and a mark. And one of the interesting things about the 4-H emblem is it is one of the most recognized brands. So I have a little multiple choice quiz for you. What year was the name and emblem adopted? Just go ahead and respond with a click of submit, and we'll see what y'all get on this. Now, somebody has to respond. Okay, we're getting some answers. Four of you have given me a guess. If you haven't guessed, go ahead and put one in there. And then we're going to, oh, there goes 7 of y'all. Yay. So here are your results. We have that 85% of you believe it was 1914, and 14, or one person believes 1924. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of the emblem because I think it helps us understand a little bit more about why there are some things about the 4-H emblem that don't necessarily apply at UGA or the College of Ag, how it gets to be a little bit different. I'm going to give my slide a second. The 3-leaf clover was actually introduced between 1907 and 1908, and it was represented with the head, heart, and hands. They added that 4th H in 1911. In 1918, the term 4-H actually appeared in a federal document. The 4-leaf clover emblem was patented in 1924, and in 1939, when that patent expired, Congress passed a law to protect the 4-H name and emblem against misuse. A lot of times you'll hear folks say, oh, the emblem's copyrighted or it's patented. It's not. It has a law that goes with it. It is similar to the presidential seal. So it has been elevated to an even higher level than anything else. That's why we have that 18 U.S.C. 707 that accompanies our emblem on everything, and not a little circle for a trademark or anything like that. There are lots of regulations that go along with that because of its protection under a federal statute. The level of protection, as I said, is similar to that of the President's seal, and it defines that the 4-H emblem must be green or should be green. It is a 4-leaf clover with a stem. The letter H should be in white or gold, and it is an insignia imitation. And we'll talk about kind of the exceptions and the ways you can do things differently with the emblem. As Cindy reminded, it's not just, too, that it's the law to do that in case of the 4-H emblem, but if we are going to keep our brand, we're going to keep it under a certain level of protection. For those of us who've worked in extension for some time, this has kind of grown into more enforcement and more conversation. When I worked as a county extension agent in a county, and granted that was almost 20 years ago, we didn't talk about all the rules of the name and emblem, and in fact we did a lot of things with them that by law are not allowed. There is a fine of not more than $5,000 for an individual and $10,000 for a group if you misuse the emblem, and you could go to prison. Interestingly, just out of curiosity, I researched what the fine was, or what would happen if you misuse the seal of the President of the United States, and we are exactly the same. So I like to think that means we're just as important as the presidential seal, although I think Obama or whoever was in office may disagree with me on that one. So let's kind of think about what are some of our rules. What is our quick reference? The clover should have 4 leaves, and there should be an H on each left. The stem always points to the right as you look at the image, and the image cannot be changed. That 18 U.S.C. 707 should appear at the right base or below the lower right leaf. So it either can come out from the stem or off to the side, kind of like it does right now in this one. And I'm going to see if my little arrow will point to it. And you can see, yes, it's right there at the base, but you also could have it, if I can draw a straight line, sticking out right there. But it does need to say that. That is the code number, actually, where you would find the law that goes along with what the 4-H emblem can be. It must appear in its entirety. It can't be covered, watermarked, or cut off. So even if we thought it looked really good to put some kind of mark on the emblem, maybe if we wanted to put a solid dot or something, maybe we wanted to try to combine the arch over the one side of it and so that they were kind of together, like I put this circle over that. It is against the rules. You can't do that. The emblem should be upright, so it shouldn't tilt or be sideways. It is not screened, shaded, gradiated, or multicolored. So we can't make it all different shades of green coming in. The official color is PMS 347. When I say that in groups, I always get snickers with that. But if someone asks you the official color green, that is it. Not Kelly green, not 4-H green, not Clover green. It is PMS 347. The emblem itself can also be white, black, or gold. The H's can be white or gold or green or black, or it can be the background color of the fabric. So if I was doing a red shirt, the H's could be red because they're that background color of the fabric. The emblem cannot be distorted, shaped, or stretched. And Cindy gave us one of the best explanations I've ever heard about why you use the different kinds of things and how to stretch it and make sure things are always keeping their correct sizing. If you have the emblem in jewelry or fine art, it can be metal, and in that case, it might be copper colored. It's a 4-H center. We have a copper emblem. If it's leather or wood, the same thing are okay, even if it conflicts with those color specifications. If you are using it in animation, if you have a PowerPoint that you have the emblem slide, rolling into, or a slideshow or a video clip, or even on a website, as long as the end point, it must comply with the standard rules, it's allowed. Our official name is 4-H, and the emblem should not replace the word 4-H. So we shouldn't have a shirt that has just Georgia emblem. It should still say Georgia 4-H. And 4-H should always appear with the number 4, the dash, and the letter H capitalized. The entity that is using it needs to be included with the name and emblem. That means in a county program, if you have the emblem on something, somewhere it should clearly identify that it is the county, your county. If it is a district program, the district name. In the case of the state program, the state name. For example, even on this PowerPoint, if you look on this slide at the bottom, it has the University of Georgia Cooperative Extension. And under my name, it says Georgia 4-H. So it clearly identifies that this emblem is being used with Georgia 4-H. The only thing I'm given permission to use the emblem with is in terms of the word Georgia. In your counties, you are only allowed to use the emblem with your county name. To leave it blank, that implies that it's National 4-H, and that's why we need to make sure that we use it just as it is. So who can use the emblem? And my slide nicely says, it depends. 4-Hers and volunteers can use the emblem and name as part of a chartered 4-H club with the club's name, and I've kind of already gone over this. We talked a little bit about district programs and how they use things. It's very important if you are going to sell something across a county line that you talk to Arch before to get permission, and it needs to say Georgia 4-H. For example, if you had a great opportunity to get a lot of little sling bags and you wanted them just to have the emblem on them, they would have to say Georgia 4-H, and in order for you to do that fundraiser and raise those funds, you would have to go through the state 4-H program. Commercial vendors have to get authorization either at the state level if they're just selling within the state or at National 4-H headquarters. Several times when we're at trade shows, there'll be people there selling items that they're located in Texas. If they have not, they should have gotten permission from USDA in order to sell at that show to national groups. That's not something you necessarily need to worry about managing from your end. But if a vendor in your county comes in and says, can I have the names and addresses of all the county offices? I have this great deal on hand towels that I want to sell with the 4-H emblem, and I want to send them to everybody. They actually need to get permission from Arch to do that. That's not something that you can work with. So how do you think the 4-H name and emblem is most often used incorrectly? What do you think is the biggest mistake people make? Everybody type in an answer, or where do you think we see it most often? And don't forget to hit submit when you give me an idea. I've got 3 of y'all who gave me some ideas. Let's see what else you think. This really is a what do you think answer. I'm not going to call out who's right or wrong. Okay, let's see what y'all said. I see T-shirts without the U.S. code T-shirts, the wrong color green without the code in the corner. I would say currently probably what I see the most things that are incorrect are T-shirts, and it has to do with the color. The 2 places I see shirts most often incorrect are 4-H camp at Rock Eagle because we forget that our tribal colors are not green, black, or gold. At least in most cases, most of the tribal colors are not. So a 4-H emblem in red because you're a Muskogee, orange because you're a Cherokee, or blue because you're a Shawnee is incorrect. And also our SAFE program, and that's volunteers using the emblem. Probably across the board over time, the most incorrect use is not having that identification of who is it going with. And so when you think about making sure that that county name is on there somewhere, that just goes back to, too, when you produce great stuff, you want folks to know who you are. So let's look at some different things. And these are all real things that we found out and about before. And some of them actually are items from before we really policed a lot of the name and emblem. So I want you to look. There's 5 items on the screen, and I know they're a little bit hard to see. But you can type in the chat box if you think any of the items 1 through 5 are incorrect. So if you think one of them is incorrect, give us a number in the chat box. Once I have a few numbers down there, I'll show you the answer. Brock and Paul are really quick to say 5 and 4. The interesting thing on all of these as we go to the next slide is it kind of depends. Now, you are exactly right. 5 is dead wrong. The emblem is not an official emblem. It's turned sideways and it's upside down. On fabric, you can have things that run in different directions as long as the fabric in its main direction is correct. The pin is correct. The gold award, it depends on where it was purchased. The little onesie that was hard to see in the bottom, it is correct. And the good luck bear that several of y'all called on, it's really okay. It doesn't say the word 4-H anywhere. It is a good luck Care Bear, and those have been around since the 80s. In fact, that one may be from the 80s. We don't own the 4-leaf clover. We actually own the 4-H emblem, and that's a really that sounds like wordsmithing, but it's very important. That is what we cover. We're going to look at some handouts now. If you look on these handouts, and y'all, I will tell you, all of these handouts came out of my programming. So if you think something's wrong, don't go blaming Elbert County because their name's flashed on there very big. But let's go ahead and type in any of those that you think are incorrect. One, two, three, 4, 5. Brock thinks 4 is wrong. Somebody would argue with him if we were in person, but he's correct. Jennifer says they're all wrong, and she gets the gold star here. This is my tricky one. On the detective picture that we had up at the top, the emblem was actually, you know what, I'm going to go back to the other slide where you can see them better because I can tell you the answers. On this one, the emblem is in a magnifying glass, and that's a really cute concept, but the whole issue is it's cut off and it's turned sideways, and the emblem's also the wrong shape here. Also, on the front of this handout, it doesn't say who it is. It doesn't say Georgia anywhere. I'm going to assume on the back that it does. Our Elbert County one is missing the USC. The summer celebration with the cows, it says 4-H, and it doesn't have the emblem anywhere, and we need to have the 4-H emblem with that. Over here, there is a boring girl slap on top of a 4-H emblem. Totally incorrect. Now, interestingly, this one, it doesn't say 4-H anywhere. So technically, we just have a 4-leaf clover with a lot of pictures in it. But it is representative of a 4-H program. So it is missing the word 4-H. And if you use a shape like this one in the place of the 4-H emblem, because sometimes that's effective if you're using a 4-leaf clover, you also need to include an emblem someplace else on the page. So if you opt to use a clover because you want to do something with it, you can't do the emblem, make sure you put the emblem someplace else on the page. We're going to look at one more, which are some clothes. So y'all go ahead on this one. Tell me 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Are any of those incorrect? I like Brock's spirit, too, because it is a little hard to see on the photo some of the intricacies of it. Let's talk about them. Number one, the H's are yellow. Now, oops, bad arrow on my part. Some people would probably like to say they're gold, but they're yellow, and there's no reason that they should be yellow except for it adds to the color scheme in here. So it should be, those H's should be white, or it could be black, which is the fabric color. 3 and 4 are actually fine. They're white. They have the green H's. They say Georgia. One of them actually says Northeast District on it. See if I can kind of do the arrow. This one says Northeast District. Oops, just did the arrow. And this one does say Georgia right down underneath. Number 5 is fine, Georgia 4-H. And actually, a giant 4-H emblem will be fine, too, without Georgia on it, as long as I purchased it from National 4-H Supply. And then we do have a problem with this. Oops, I pointed to the wrong part. That 4-H emblem right there, it's stylized. It even has the USC 707, and it's not correct. It's been made cartooned. So that would be incorrect as well. So when you think about the different things I showed you and about the 4-H emblem, what would you find most interesting or informative? What was your wow or OMG, I had no idea moment? Or did you all of a sudden realize you had something in your office that you completely shouldn't use? Type that in there and think, what was your wow moment in this presentation? While you're typing too, Jennifer asked for on 3 and 4, which were the 4-H shirt and the jacket. There is an exception in clothing if it is too small to do the USC 707 on the embroidery. It can be left off. Some embroiderers can add it, some embroiderers cannot, and it just has to do with the fabric and how well. I've actually seen some of them when they put it in, it's so distorted, it's not a good reflection. I'm going to give you another second to put in your wow moment. We'll publish those 3 quick little answers we had. Now, I will tell you on the going to jail if you get misused kind of freaks you out a little bit. Makes you think, wow, what have I done that I'm going to now get arrested for? Just like the great comment Cindy made is if you have something that is incorrect, you are don't continue to reproduce it. But for about the last 10 years, we've handed out, well, I guess we haven't the last 2 years, but for a very long time, we handed out a certificate for state winners that had a cutout of the 4-H emblem on it. They were very nice. I got one as a 4-Her, so they've been around forever. They violated name and emblem, but they were expensive, they were nice, and they were serving a need. We used them all up. We didn't order more. So if you have things like that, rather than throwing everything away, just make sure you begin to use the correct one. If you're ordering T-shirts or clothing and you're not sure, hey, I think this is okay, I'm not sure if it's okay, send me a picture. Cindy, I think, said she was the po-po about some of this. Sometimes I like to say I'm the Clover Cop. Technically, Arch is your Clover Cop, but I'll tell you, if you send him a picture, he's probably going to hand it to me and ask me if it's right. I've read the rules more a lot and done all the teaching on it. So I'll be happy to look at something and tell you if it's okay. I have lots of folks say, what difference does it really make? Well, years ago when eBay first started out, there were a lot of 4-H merchandise on eBay, but it was for the new in quotes, 4-H club. And the H's it said stood for it, so the new 4-H club, hookers, whores, harlots, and hussies. Come join us. And they used the 4-H emblem and put that around it. So we certainly don't want those groups to use the 4-H emblem, and in order for those groups not to be allowed to use it inappropriately, we as the owners of the emblem also have to make sure we're using it appropriately. These are the references of where I got the information that I used today. I'll also let you know that the guidelines are all in the 4-H Awards Guidebook, and it's under policies and procedures under 4-H clubs. So it's going to be in there with eligibility and everything else. There is a great 4-page handout that explains all of these rules. Brock, you don't have to have a signed agreement to print shirts or pamphlets. What you, at least from the 4-H emblem standpoint is, in your county, Brock, if it says Randolph County 4-H, you and Chris are responsible for that being correct. So in your approving it, that in a sense is that contract. So if you have any questions, let me know. If there's something you're not sure if it's correct, we're not going to bring the cuffs and start arresting people who have incorrect camp T-shirts or anything like that, but we are probably going to remind you why we need to do it correctly. I'm going to take Lock Talk off, so now if anyone has any questions of Cindy or I, we'll have a couple minutes to do that. Thanks, Jennifer. That's a great compliment. I don't have anything else, and if Cindy doesn't, I think we can clear the room as it's time for, as you're ready to go. I'm sure you have other great things to do on your Friday.
Nothing more from me. You want me to stop this archive, Jenny?
I would say yes.